like, that's just like you're filling in spots that you feel like you need to fill in with kind of autofill stuff. But the tricky part about that is then it's like, well, then what do I write? You know, like if it's a very free form, I don't fully. It took me a while to figure out what was the way to go. You know,
I
have
thought
you?
there was this guy who made like an electromagnetic vibraphone. Um, I followed his format a
With
little bit,
LSU?
although no, I think he went to Princeton, but
Hmm.
he I followed his format a little bit in the idea that what he really made was like a creative project that was technical. You know what I mean? Like he made an instrument,
Yeah.
he modified an instrument, and then he wrote pieces for it, which is kind of like that's like what I wanted to do, right? So I followed his to an extent, although he definitely, I mean, he went to fucking
Right.
Princeton, so he spent a little bit more time talking about like the concept of the instrument, like the acoustic instrument interface in and of itself, and like intervening in that. And like he definitely went a little bit more um, scholarly.
Right.
That's not the right word. I don't know, but um, yeah. And then when I say that, like they're not gonna like hand it back to you with like missing periods circled, like Anna when she had her, she's still like, I don't know if she's still doing it now, but like she spent some time after it was approved and everything, like just fixing things for her own website. Like the idea of just kind of like, well, I still want to.
Oh,
Nobody
right.
said I had to fix this, but like I realize that this wording here isn't great or whatever. Like she still wanted to go in.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree. Like there's spots where I'm sure between like when it gets uploaded to the graduate school, I'll have like a 10-day gap or so, that I will go and try and like loosen the language. Like frankly, there's a lot of stuff that I wrote in such a way, and I after I got Jesse's final feedback on Friday because of how busy we've been, and then I just sent it out today. And I didn't go back enough times, I think, to clear this up as I want to, but there's a lot of times where I like was like, here are the ways, like, to prove my point later in the paper. Like, here are the ways that you interact with a circuit bend instrument. And then at the end I'm like, these are not all the ways you do, but this is the majority. And it's possible that there are some ways. And I'm like, and Jesse's like, why do you have that in there? And I'm like, well, because I don't want somebody to like be like, aha, but don't forget, you can have a phone. And I'm like, and he's like, don't, like, just say it. And like, you're not, if you have somebody bring that up, you can always just tell them afterwards, like, yes, but the whole point of one of the elements of my system is that, yes, 99% of the ways that you interact with a circuit bend instrument is a touch or a dial or a button. And now I'm trying to give you the option to get away from that. So he's like, you don't have to like, there's not going to be any like content police, so to say. Well, I don't want to talk about
Well,
police,
no, I
but I
mean,
mean, you know
I
what
think
I mean?
the idea is like there's a point at which they say, okay, you're done, but it's like
Yeah.
also you're never really done. Like, of course, there's
Right.
always things that could be fixed. I mean, I've gone through dissertations where I've seen errors that are like ones that people have already graduated. I'm kind of like, oh, okay, so it gets
Yeah.
read, but it's not, it's not a book. Like nobody publishes
Right.
a book.
Right.
Like it's not given like that fine tooth comb. I don't think that like a published
Yeah.
book or
It's
whatever
also
is.
interesting to think about the idea of, like I talk about Nick Collins a ton, and I've met him. Like I haven't spent a ton of time with him, but I met him and I
Yeah.
know people who know him, right? And like Garnet Hertz, have you guys heard of Garnet Hertz? Or Garnet Hertz, he teaches at Emily Carr, Victoria, and like British Columbia. And I read a ton about his theories on like media archaeology and how circuit bending is a art practice, like it's a practical practice of exploring the history of items versus just talking about them, right? Um, and I've like friended him on Facebook because I'd like to like just one day just I talk to him about some stuff. But I'm like, oh man, at the point there's gonna probably come a point where I'm like, hey, here's my dissertation, you can read it. And there's an off chance that he may read it, and then he might be like, this guy doesn't fucking understand anything I'm talking about. Dude, you suck. Like, you know what I mean? It's just a weird world that
Yeah.
we live in where like you're writing about people that you may know, or people who know them, versus like writing about Cage, right?
It's funny. I've been getting Nick, I'm sure you get these too. You get notifications from the LSU Digital Library about how many times your document's been downloaded.
Whoa, really?
And I got like there were like 11 last month, It's probably
It's
all you,
probably
isn't it,
me.
Tony?
It's probably me. It's probably me because I've just been looking at it like, okay.
Yep.
How do I? Okay.
And I know I looked at Nick's and oh God, what's that guy's name? Is it Corey?
Corey. Corey.
Corey, yeah. I looked. Corey's is long.
Mine.
Although he wrote a lot of, I think his was mostly music, but his was like 300 pages.
When I added in the code for my webpage, like there's the performance interface, it's like 110 or so pages long. It's a lot.
With the code.
With the code, yeah. And it's not a ton of code really, but it's just there's a lot of like full page pictures and stuff to look at. And,
Yeah.
it is the kind of thing where it's like the first chapter, the first two chapters, like an overview of circuit bending, and then overview. I guess that's not an overview. That's somewhere in between. But there's there's just a lot to talk about, and I'm like, I'd rather just talk about it now. I'd rather them tell me like maybe you don't need all this stuff, and be like, well, I want to keep it in because I want it to be a good read. Versus,
It's true.
I didn't put that much. Yeah. I really didn't put much. I mean, because I put in the chapter explaining like how Bendit works, I put like code samples, right, in text, but I had nothing to put in the appendices because my pieces are all improvised, right? So I was like, well, maybe I could just take like the performance interface that shows like, here's how I talked to this CD player. Here's how I waited for this one to tell the interface to, make a button disappear. So I just threw it in there to be like, they might say like you don't need that, and that's fine. But I threw it in there because I was like, I have no scores. I have no, Eric, you put your server code in, right? But you didn't put the code in for every piece, right? You put it in for.
I put the server code as an appendix, but it was only like 2 pages. It was very small.
Yeah.
Might not need it. I mean, yeah. Hey, let's talk about other stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
For the stream, and then let's talk about just like life after the stream is done.
Right, I forgot the stream. Yeah.
Me too. Oh no, you were probably gonna say the same thing I was. So you go.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna talk about the meeting with Mark. Yeah. Mark, and what was the other guy's name? Fede? It's like short for Federico or something like that. They're from Ohio State. We met with them. I can't remember what day this was. I don't know what day it is anymore. And it was fun. It was pretty interesting. They both had looked at our workshop stuff from Moxonic, and been using. Did you just say you're looking at where Ohio? Isn't it like west of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I know exactly where Ohio is. Yes.
But they were doing some cool stuff. They have used Collab-Hub already for some laptop ensemble performances, especially in the whole remote instruction era. And we were trying to find the right balance too between well, Nick and I had to talk a little bit about, and maybe Nick, I don't know how much this you want to talk about on the stream, but we did have to talk a little bit about like the scope of this project and like where it's going. And part of that is at what point do we start handing code over? Because a lot of this stuff is like, I mean, I know like when I wrote code for one of my pieces for hydrocardia, like a lot of it was just like finding kind of reverse engineering stuff that was already out there, or like finding other code to copy and paste and like make that. And that was much simpler than what Collab-Hub is. But I think Fede had already started to reverse engineer some of the stuff we had done. But Nick and I were saying that we probably want to make this open source once it's in a finished state.
Yes, yeah. I think that's a goal. I mean, I've already, that's the plan with Bendit too, is to get it to a point where it's finished, and that if you care nothing about tweaking it and just want to use it, you can do it. But I haven't stopped before it gets to that point, right? Because at a certain point, Like you've got to make it so that the things you wanted to do happen. And then
Yeah.
to say it's open source so that anything you want to add on to it is up to you. But at least for the people who don't, they don't say, well, how do you do this? And you're like, well, you have to add it. Like that's, you know, I mean, there's always going to be things to an extent, but you can at least be like, I hit the roadmap's done. Here's what I wanted this to be. And in this case, what we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And
I,
now
I
you,
think
you want to be.
I think we'll have a version that and Nick, I didn't realize that you were paying for Heroku. I thought you were just using um, free version. But
Right. That's the thing I think about.
sorry, what was I gonna say? The main thing I think that we want to get done before sort of officially releasing it or saying that it's at a state where it's finished is getting the rooms and the namespaces functionality set up. Which I texted you guys at like 3 a.m, like 2 nights ago, I figured out namespaces. So I do have a lot of code writing to do still, but I figured it out. So what we'll need to do, maybe there's a better way to do this, but so namespaces and rooms in Socket. Nick, you probably already know this, but Tony, just to kind of catch you up, namespaces are not meant to be created dynamically, although people do kind of kludge that. But the idea is that when namespaces like slash whatever is the address that you're sending your messages to, right? Like the URL slash OSU or slash LSU or slash whatever. Those aren't being changed on the fly. You set those up ahead of time. So that is probably the way that I think would be a great way to use it, is to have when we're at the early stages, at least, we could give until we actually release the code, or until until they have a need for it, we could give OSU their own namespace. And so and so all we have to do for that is literally, sorry, go ahead.
I'll take one.
We have to set that up ahead of time, but literally all we have to do in the server code is create an array with the names of namespaces in it, and we just have it iterate through that array at the beginning and create a namespace for every entry in the array. So we would have to, as people request or as we decide to give out namespaces, we would have to update the server code with that, and you'd have to redeploy to Heroku. Rooms, on the other hand, can be created dynamically, so those can be left up to OSU if they have their own namespace. They could join the OSU namespace and only see other OSU people, but then within that they can create additional rooms where if they say maybe they have a piece where there's it's 12 players, but it's really a quartet, so it's 3 different parts, so they could divide up room 1 is player 1 through 3, room 2 is players 4 through 6, whatever. That they can do themselves. Rooms can be created dynamically. We have to build that functionality in, but they could send a message to the server saying, make this room and let me join it.
Yeah. You there?
Yeah.
I'll say I don't use namespaces much. I guess I just use the default, right? Because Socket just has a default namespace, right?
Dude, I am so sorry. I just mansplained all that to you. I totally forgot that you've been using Socket for the last 2 years.
I'm definitely, there's tons of Socket that I am oh, right, that's what this. And I certainly don't know as much as Nick either, but it's the type of thing where what I have done with it is rooms, and that's just to simplify with the Bendit stuff. So basically what happens is when a Bendit board logs on, it makes a new room just with device 1 and device 2, or what will happen in another week or so is the board will tell the server, I'm device 17. So whether there's been 16 before me or not, make me a room called device 17. And they're all in their own rooms on the default namespace, just so you can communicate to the individual boards really easily by just saying, this set of interface buttons go here, or Eric's going to go here, or again, you could say, give me 1 through 16 or 18. But the namespace would be, well, I don't know, maybe this is backwards. If I'm already using rooms, I don't know if a namespace is then overkill for what I'd like to do, but eventually it'd be nice to be able to say, okay, if I have 6 devices and I don't want to just talk to them by their number, I want to say these 4 are a quartet of tape players and these 4 are a quartet of speak and spells, and I want just the speak and spells. Instead of having to say, well, their number is 8 through 12, can I just say anybody in namespace speak and spell? Whatever room, any namespace
You
for
could
the
set up
same.
names. You could set up namespaces. Well, I mean, the it was pretty hard to figure out how to create multiple namespaces that all have that are all essentially identical to each other in terms of their functionality. Because namespaces are kind of made to have like one namespace is for chat, one namespace is for playing the game or whatever. Like they're
It's different
they're
data
not necessarily meant to be. Hmm?
like different data channels for
Yeah,
lack
like
of a
you
better.
do different things in different namespaces. Whereas the way we set it up really is that you're doing the same exact things in the namespaces. You're just having walls between like OSU and
Mhm.
whoever else.
Yeah.
So it was pretty difficult to figure out how to do that where it's like, I really just want this code I've already written for the server for this. I just want that in with like 5 namespaces that all do the exactly the same thing. I think for what you're doing, if you were to create different namespaces for Bendit, I don't know, it might be overkill, but it depends.
Well, I'm just thinking if I'm already using rooms, what's another way to subgroup devices? Because it seems like namespace is big, rooms is more,
Yes.
focused. So if I'm already using the more focused one, can I just go out a step, so to say, and kind of be like, well, these ones, rooms 16 through 18, are all part of the namespace of the speak and spells, and they're all going to get the same message here, and then these get these ones. Because if I had to do it by numbers, that's not impossible, but it might just be easier nomenclature wise to be, this board's going to be attached to this thing, and it's this number board, but it's also part of this broader namespace of like it's a toy, right? And these are media players.
I think namespaces for Bendit probably make sense for ensembles
Yeah.
more than devices.
Okay.
Devices make sense for
Yeah.
we like so I think the reason is going to help us a lot is that, we've already had situations where we've done a Saturday night stream and we see usernames in there. And
Mhm.
whether those are actually people who are currently active or they didn't get removed or whatever, like the namespaces, you're only going to see people in the same namespace as you. So we can keep using the server we can have our own namespace for the Saturday night streams that no one else is going to be in. And so we'll only be interacting with each other. We don't have to worry about other users popping up and sending data that conflicts with what we're doing. The other thing it's nice for is I think it's easier. There's probably a way to do this for rooms too, but it's the functionality to have some certification to join a name. Like we can password protect namespaces,
Oh, that's good.
which I think is great. I think that's actually like super, especially since we're going to be just like saying like, here OSU, you have your own namespace. It would be great if we can like have passwords on it. There's less of a chance of different ensembles like, you know, was going to be like Zoom bombing or Collab-Hub bombing each other.
Well, that's how that works, right?
What game? Sorry. Drawful. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how have you been
I know
in
exactly. Yes, I know exactly what
you
you're talking
not play a Jackbox game?
about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming then, Nick, what they're doing is they're using the rooms are technically because the namespaces are the games and the rooms are the rooms, right? Like when you go on okay, that makes a ton of sense. And this makes more
Interesting.
sense when you're talking a server on such a bigger scale than anything I've done or even maybe intend to do right now with Bandit. But it would definitely be something down the line to be able to say if you as a school or something are going to lead your own Bendit workshop and you want to use the remote Bendit and you don't want to just run one local, then you could go on and just say point to this namespace, and then all the boards are their own little rooms in there, and you're good to go. But yeah, that's for Collab-Hub. I think yes, that's something I'm glad we were working on that. Absolutely, I think that's definitely something in the future, and hopefully, I think to work that into Bendit in the line would be great.
I did figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is also different too because for me, as a performer, I'm like, well, if I have my own server, I don't have to worry about can I get access to it, or as like I think about the time Chase and I performed, and get we couldn't get we were using just native WebSockets, and we couldn't get through Edgeroom. Yeah, the ports, right?
Yeah.
And so it just really everything up. And so for me, I'm just like, oh, if I just have my router here and I'm ready to go, it's good. But clearly, there's times where you need to have that, right? And you don't want to be able to be like, oh, I gotta go. Maybe the server's in another building or something. If you want to have that running, it's kind of yeah, I get that.
I couldn't believe I was so happy when we got to Missouri, Oxonic. I couldn't believe that regular OSC worked on their network. It saved my ass. So
Yeah.
I can't remember what problem I was having, but I remember like that more. I got up early to come up with a plan B for the piece because I was like, man, if I can't use just regular OSC, I can't do this. And I don't remember what. I think there was a thought. Oh, it was just to use the iPad. Like it wasn't even like Anna and I communicating over the internet was working fine, but to use the iPad as the interface was the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just I was lucky. I was just like I got down to their I spent like 2 hours coming up with my plan B. Then I get to their computer lab in their basement and I'm like, oh, everything just works. I guess I can just relax now.
I can still see that computer lab like it was yesterday, and like that was like days before, or
I
at
know,
least in
right?
America. In America, it's like 'cause it was happening beforehand
Yep.
everywhere else, but it was just like days before everything switched. It was so think about that. But yes, but so this I don't know if this is something to talk about now or not, but it's something to think about, and we should think about the future of this, right? This is all on one server. There's namespaces on one server. If something happens to that server, you know, it's something to think about to at least kind of have some kind of materials or something and kind of instruct people like if you're going.
Or just ensuring that that functionality is still part of the because you shouldn't have to change anything really. Like actually, like Nick, when you sent the super like I just had to install I think the packages
Yeah.
and then I could run it locally really easily.
Right. Frankly, to me, this might be overstating it. I feel like all remotely, it's easy to solve local stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's you or whoever. Like, here's how you've got your server. You can set it up so you can use it. The remote's the Collab-Hub server, but you can also just quickly run that same file with the same configurations locally. If you get on stage in rehearsal and you're like, oh shit, it's down or something, right? That's
Yeah. Nick, how when you were looking at Heroku on Friday, how much traffic server right now? Oh, just in general, like I don't know what kind of what the $12 plan that you're paying for, like where that. Mhm. Oh, is that me? Sorry. I fix. Okay, I fixed.
okay.
Yeah,
Monday today. I know I have no concept of time or day.
me, dude. Yeah, oh, great. I know.
And the idea, right, is that you would probably hear something from Heroku if so much traffic in a certain amount of time was coming where they'd be like, this is not a hobby anymore, right? Like, right.
Hmm.
Mm.
Not great, not terrible.
Mm.
And they're hitting 10%, close to 10%. Is that what I mean? I assume it says max 9.6. I assume that's what that line is 9.6%. So that's not nothing. I mean, we're still well within. That's high enough that I feel like when we get to a finished state, we actually might need to plan for more bandwidth.
Mm.
Huh. Um, right. Yeah, I mean it can balloon really fast
Yeah.
because even just although there, I mean, when we were like when we jammed it with Jeff last night, we're probably not really sending that much to each other. Like Jeff even said at some point, he's like, I didn't even touch those sliders or whatever. Like there's oh yeah, so what can you see ours? Does that go back far enough? That's last night, Saturday the 6th at 9 CDT. What's DT?
Denver time. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, Anna says it's daylight saving. So that's probably that little tiny spike there is probably us. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Like like I said, we didn't really do that much. They're really giving it a workout.
yeah, that sounds. I mean, it sounds like they're doing some really intensive stuff.
One thing, so looking at this, it makes me think about, um, I told you guys that a couple nights ago I figured out the whole namespace thing, and there's some ways that I'm looking at the server code that, well, here, okay, so this is a good discussion to have, and um, when we set up the server in this sort of whatever the version is, we should monitor like has the load increased
Mm.
because the way that the server changes happen might improve, stay the same, or you know increase the load of on the server depending upon how the communications are happening. So one thing I wanted to ask you, Nick, was with the way that you're storing data on the server, um, like for example, when someone sends a slider value, it's control. It's a control, so it has the header control. It has the actual header of the control, with slider one or whatever, that has the value, and that goes into a object inside an array, I believe it was, or maybe it's just an object. What are some of the, in terms of storing that data on the server, what are some of the yeah, well, and what uh the names, namespace and room stuff I was looking at, has the potential to remove the need to store any of that information on the server. So I'm wondering, so I wanted to ask, like, there's a couple of things, actual values being sent. And then there's the idea of people being able to see what controls are available. You know what I'm saying? So clearly the way that it's currently set up so that I can log on, I can see, oh, somebody is sending slider 1, somebody's sending dial 2. You can see like what kind of data people are sending. Is there, other than seeing that list of available controls, is there any other benefit to having the data stored on the server? Cool. because because I think if we move into this namespace room whatever workflow, we can eliminate the need to store a lot of that stuff on the server. I still intend to have a system where you can say like these are the controls available, but I think we can minimize that load a bit, because basically like the way it's set up is like if you're in a room and you broadcast that room, or if you send to a specific user ID in the room, which we have the ability to do, it just goes to that person. It doesn't have to go be stored anywhere or be pulled by the receiver.
But do you run into problems then where, excuse me, like, I mean, how much storage, so to say, I guess, like, we would need a different plan, right, for that kind of stuff, or no? Is the amount of data just not going to really pile up that much? A lot of
Not
stuff.
nothing. Yeah. Really? I thought you were.
What could it be then?
Well, no, they have to be stored because the end user, whoever's getting the controls, has to ask for them. So they're definitely being stored because I have to say get slider in order to receive that number. So it has to be stored on the server in order for me to say like, hey, please give that to me. That doesn't come from the peer, that comes from the server. Well, sure it is. Because if I send get slider to the server, it's going to send back slider equals 40 or whatever the current value is. It's not getting that from the client, it's getting that from the server. It's not getting that from the other client. I mean, it's not like, yeah. By 197, you're talking about line 197 in the code. Okay, hang on, I gotta pull it up. Oh no, go ahead. I'll get there. Oh, we see your screen, but we still see Heroku. Yeah, yeah. Values that values. return control. Go back to that previous one again, 197, whatever that was. Yeah, so it runs that get control values function, and if values doesn't equal null, so if it returns that it returns that there's a header, socket emit control header plus the value of it. So it is storing the value on the server in that values array or object or whatever. Oh yeah, you were sick as hell. But this is okay though, because I wanted to see the way that it's written, the way it's currently, yeah, the way that it's currently with the header and the value, we absolutely do need to have the header available somehow, because part of the benefit of this is that I can log on, I can see there's 5 people on, and these are the values that they're sending, or these are the controls they're sending out. I have to know what's available to me, but we don't have to store the values because right.
Yeah.
So that's like when I'm like doing some of the server code updates that I'm doing, I want to go into it with the assumption, well, my plan was to go into it with the assumption that I need to know what the headers are somehow, but not store the values on the server. And it looks like that's the case. Cool.
It also seems to me that you're going to get
right.
it also seems to me, sorry, just to say that if you're going to need to store values for a long period of time, it would probably be more beneficial to have something based, right? Like an MySQL or something like that. Yeah. But the headers, yes, makes sense because a lot of you're really resetting up a bunch of stuff each time you have to reset all the headers.
This is kind of like, Nick, you and I were talking the other day about the idea of offloading some of the responsibility to the client. And I think this is one case where that makes sense. I think it's the client's responsibility to identify what headers they're going to be sending. So like an enable switch, something like that. Like they have a slider called slider 1, and they have to enable it, because that's a way to tell the server this header slider 1 is now available. And then the client can disable that, which would remove it from the server too. Like that's kind of where I'm thinking of going. Like the idea of that. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I still need some cleanup, automatic cleanup built in that maybe, like, I don't know, if nobody, I'm not sure how that works because I'm not a software developer, but like if nobody's been connecting for the last 10 minutes or something, that it just clears the header values.
Sure.
But we can also give that functionality to on a case-by-case basis, because I think you already have something in there about like clear controls, but we should also have just a way that like the client can say like, oh, I'm not going to use this header anymore for this slider, so I'm going to disable it itself from the server so that new clients don't see that anymore. Yeah, well, it could. I guess in a way, well, the functionality kind of is already there to do this. What I like the idea of being able to load up a patch and tell the server before you start sending any values, these are the headers I'm going to use. Right? Like, so I think, and I think those two can coexist. Start sending control values, it automatically stores that header hasn't already been stored. That's the way it works now. But I think also building in the functionality of define your headers before you start sending any values. There's also a way to do that. I think those two things can coexist without conflicting. But I mean, that's a big thing. Like one lesson I think we learned a little with last night's jam was like, despite the fact that we've done it 5 times, it's so hard to get everything set up. And so the more we can build in of like, if you configure ahead of time, you literally just have, maybe it's a text file, maybe it's something in your patch, maybe it's something that just says like up, load, bang. Okay, my headers have been sent to the server, so it knows what I'm getting. I don't have to like wiggle every slider so that it knows which ones I'm using. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, you want to try to make it easier to set up because yeah, that's just tricky, and particularly if you're re-performing with the same people and the same headers or similar ones. Adding a couple new ones now and then makes sense, but yeah, each and every time can get kind of tough, and particularly if you're going to do this in an ensemble setting, right, where you need to think about rehearsal time and getting in and getting set up and getting going. Like that can add up.
That's a good point. I'm wondering how they're doing it with OSU. I wonder if they're just like not worrying about it, or if they have a way that they've figured out to initialize the server. Yeah, that's true. Right. So, Nick, did you learn any new WebRTC stuff?
Yeah, WebRTC. I said WebRTC. Are you there? Can you hear me now? Okay, it's a dumb joke. I said WebRTC is like WebRTC. What is this? Just the is this like the like vanilla WebRTC for lack of a better term? Because I've only seen examples. I haven't really played around with too much of it, frankly. I got you. I'm trying to think if there's anything we can do online. You can see people who have maybe run into a similar issue. No, I haven't looked at anything.
Yeah, right, Tony.
I don't even know what my wife looks like. Oh, typing. Okay. Typing. I'm on it. I'm in it. Hi, Mark. So this is the web editor. Where do I do that? Okay.
Nick, the way that this web interface works, it just is some HTML that references the the Collab-Hub client, right? Like there's not like a ton. It's not like there's a custom client for the web app. Oh,
The message come in. The right is the message is coming to me, right? But on the right hand bottom right. Oh, okay. I mean, I'm saying the bottom on the bottom right, the message I send it just show up. Right. So it's like a mid versus broadcast, right?
versus broadcast. The web client code. Yeah. Oh boy. Right. Okay. So as we update the regular server and client, there is also this that would need to be updated alongside it. Okay.
Oh, right.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd love to start getting into Electron. I wish I could say we needed to by the times we were doing workshops. I mean, maybe if that's something you want, if you play around with a little Nick and want to get that, for bended stuff, like to look into it, or even for this to do it. But I haven't done it really. But I mean, I know one of the things people use it for a lot is to give a server a front end like UI. So that's what I would like for Bendit. Like an example of an Electron that I didn't realize. Well, they just remade it with Electron, but in P5, there's a P5 serial port library, which is what we've used to, you've got an Arduino and it's either like a Bluetooth Arduino or you're just plugging into your computer, and you want to communicate with a P5 sketch running in your web browser. Um, and like we do that for the programming digital media class that I used to teach and stuff. And they just came up with a new. You have to run a server, right, to be able to communicate between your hardware, USB, and any kind of web page, right? Because there's no direct connection. So they redid a GUI version of the server with Electron, and it's great. You can actually you can say like I want this USB port my Arduino's on, and this is these kind of settings and stuff, and it'll generate starter code for you. Like it actually says like, oh, okay, well here, go grab this and throw it in your P5 sketch. Here's how you talk to that port specifically. And to have that kind of user interface is really nice because I think a server is pretty abstract most of the times and it kind of hidden away. But to have like a version of it like that you can modify and get to really good. right. And I think the other thing too is Max. There are people who I think are like Max interface, like Max, GUI artists, but it's hard to do, right? It's hard to make a Max patch that just looks really beautiful and looks like a really good user interface. Um, and so it's a lot of time to do that, yeah. But I think Electron, you're using JavaScript, right? So you're using web design tools, which are a bit easier to style and stuff like that, and make it look nice and efficient more so than Max. Max is really the data and the audio side of things that you can't do elsewhere. But do you
I was
want? Oh, go ahead, Eric.
I was say I was pretty excited about that mirror web thing today. I was like, damn. I literally was like about to hit the $10 purchase. Granted, $10 is not a problem for an app, but
What
to hit
was
it,
the mirror web? Well, I missed. Maybe I missed this. What was the thing? Because I almost looked into doing stuff with mirror web when I was doing sound slang a couple of years ago, and then I realized it wasn't. I really needed to use Node, but this was before the Node.script came out.
mirror web just is just a way to drop your to locally serve your Max interface on a web page, and it's only local. So it's not. I mean, the functionality is pretty specific, but I was like, after last night's jam, I was like, man, I really need to be able to see like on a device like what this slider actually does. It was way too hard to keep track of the sliders I had that were controlling my own sounds, but also sending data to NICF. So I was like, well, I can make a touch OS thing that'll take a while. Maybe I should just buy this Miro app. And then they're like, oh, wait, Mirror Web exists. It's basically the app, but served on a web page. But the part of that, I forget what it's called. Part of that was some other, sorry, hang on, I'm looking at it because I forgot the name of it. Zebra.js.
Yes, yeah. Zebra's the other. I think doesn't Zebra and don't they work together like in Mira?
Something like that. Zebra.js lets you connect your own websites. It says through a remote Max patch, so it's I don't know if it's Max specific or if it could be used with other.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think Nick, were you saying that Mira uses Zebra, right? That's what's.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I thought Zebra was more generic. I didn't realize it was so specific to Mirror and Max.
I think there's definitely, well, let me know if we should or when you switch over to the idea. But I have some thoughts about what you could focus on with the web audio sides of this. And I think WebRTC is definitely an element of it. But frankly, how much we have involved in this and the communication between Max to get that with web audio, there's not many people in the web audio community for the last couple of years that I've went who have done a lot of like Max focus stuff. That's just not the main focus of the conference. But the people who have done stuff with it have done it really well. Like the New Sound, which is kind of a shoot of SoundWorks, right? The Norbert Schnell and Benjamin Matosluski, I think, at EarCam. Like they both are associated with EarCam. They have done some stuff. SoundWorks is just JavaScript, but New SoundWorks is like a Max element of that. Like I think when I did Sound Sling, which is like, oh, in Max you can generate data and send it out to people's phones. The year beforehand, they were like, we did that. And I was like, yes, but mine's a little different. But yeah, so like they've done more Mac stuff that I think has been shown at the Web Audio Conference. So the more I think we can hype up that like this brings in a different audience, and then you can still using WebRTC or something stream to a web page, and then processing on that web page, and control processing on the web audio side of things, and control through WebSockets and stuff like that.
I do really want. Maybe this is, since I'm kind of working on updating the server code anyway, maybe I could look at, is there a way to take the existing client code and make it generic enough that parts of it can be reused for other platforms? Because it'd be cool if we had a setup where it was like there's a Mac-based client, there's a web-based client, then maybe there's just like a generic. I don't know, like how do we communicate with PD?
Oh, what does PD use that does web stuff? There's something that PD does that does WebSocket stuff, right? What is it? He's also on OSU.
I can't remember what it was called. No, I know. I just can't remember what. Well, they were talking about WebSocket communication for pure data. PDWS. There's something called PDWS.
That would make sense.
But WebSockets aren't sockets.
No, they're not. You're right. So yes, but yeah, no, you're right.
Like
Because
that's a whole other platform, isn't it?
it's built Socket.io is built on WebSockets, but because it adds extra metadata right into the transmission, like you couldn't do anything with native WebSocket and communicate to a Socket.io server, vice versa. Right, Nick?
Right.
Is that it? Right. Yeah.
Well, that's too bad.
But
you know what I'm saying? Like maybe there's a way to rewrite the client so that I don't know. Maybe I'm not a really a coder, so I feel like there's a way that you could write like one file that is the node portion, and then there would be another file that's like the max portion, so that node portion gets reused whether it's max or the web interface or PD. I don't, you know. Right. Yeah, but then how does it get into PD from there?
I don't know. I really don't know enough about PD to just realize it.
It serves a website, yeah, but then how do you? It's not about generating interfaces, but getting interface in the data from the interface into the PD patch. I mean, the quick and dirty answer is throw an OSC like
Yeah, that's it.
layer between the two.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing. The OSC would solve a lot of it. I know, like Rhizome, for instance. Rhizome is built in such a way that you can communicate. You can run a server, and sorry, build a server and run it and communicate it with it, rather via OSC or through a website. But I don't think through Socket.io. I don't think it uses Socket.io. And it uses like a conventional kind of OSC styling, like this slash that slash, like what Collab-Hub does. But I think you can use specifically either OSC from Max, or you can use like that's how I was using. I built SoundSling in Rhizome, right, and ran that server like it's a node server and ran it, and then I was using JS Web, right, Eric, or what did you use? Max Web, you were saying? Or did you use your web? What was that Max object again, Eric? JWeb. I was using JWeb to communicate from Max to my server. You know what I mean? Because I was just streaming OSC values or OSC. Yes, no, it was. I was streaming OSC values into this, and that was before. That was in 2018, right? So that was before Max. It was right before Max 8 had come out, like in that fall. And now, I would like to go back one day and rewrite all of that with Collab-Hub. Really, you could do Collab-Hub as an element of it.
Well, yeah, that's the idea, Tony. I'm talking about using like setting up Collab-Hub to work with PD.
Yeah, no, I just mean for my end of things, I think it's sense sequencing or parallel data. But the other thing too with the web audio side of things is I think that's using Node within Max is also still very new within that community. You know, it's only been 2 years Node.script or Node for Max has been out. And last year there weren't that many people who were doing things with Max in particular, and then also using Max to communicate to Node. So I think if we kind of built that aspect to it, it could stream audio right from Max through to WebRTC and then process it in web audio or what have you. Like, it'd be great.
Neat. Sorry, I'm looking at
Two computers.
I know what Nick just sent. So yeah, I gotta save this. Save that should be. I need to go soon. Is there anything else that we should chat
Yeah,
about?
should we do you want to end the stream and then we can talk about other stuff? Or is that different? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to be working on namespace, adding namespace functionality to the server, and as a secondary item, researching PD. Like, how are we going to get Collab-Hub into PD?
For me, I'm cleaning up the Bendit stuff. Now that I'm done writing about it, I can actually keep writing it. So
Tony, I
that
feel like you should just play Animal Crossing for a few days.
I need to just play Animal Crossing. I wasn't on my island yesterday, and I didn't really to talk to my neighbors today. I ran in to get turnips 2 minutes to spare, but I bet if I talked to like Dom or Cranston, they'd be like, "I haven't seen you in 2 days. What's wrong? What's up?
I know you should. You should play Animal Crossing.
What's that? Wait, what? That's two people. Wait. Yes. Oh yeah, I'm beyond that. But I missed him on Saturday. I wasn't on Saturday. Yeah.
I think you
Eric?
should play Animal Crossing for 3 days, and then you should think about not actually you don't have to actually make anything, but think about like how I'm guessing that right out of the box, Collab-Hub is not going to work with Bendit.io. So
No, not right.
how do we
So
marry the two?
yes, yeah. Well, so that's what I've been thinking about because the at it also uses socket. It's also built on socket.io, and also it's definitely easy to communicate with it. I think we'd have to. There's two things that I like to do, and Nick and I have already talked a bit about it, which is trying to make a Bendit Max API. So you could, from a Max patch, use the same Bendit nomenclature to write scripts. So your Max patch is a client, right, and it's communicating to Bendit boards through the server, and stuff like that. The other, because I don't really want to use NodeScript to run a server for Bendit. I want it to be a client so that you do all this other Mac stuff and then it just outputs as out to the other clients, which are CircuitBend devices.
So you want a server located somewhere else. You want a remote server. You want Max to be a client, and you want the Bendit board to be a client.
Right. Yeah. And whether the server is remote or you just elsewhere on your machine, just go npm start, and start it.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the other aspect too is, I think if we can use Bendit nomenclature on this side, but then still talk to Collab-Hub, that's where it would have to be. So maybe on the server side, Bendit Hub is where maybe there needs to be some kind of marrying of it, right, Nick? Because then if it's the Collab-Hub message comes to the server written in Bendit Hub, and it's like written in like the OSC formatting, it just says, okay, we'll take this, right, and send, this means this board, this means this switch, and this is the function it's supposed to run, the method. Eric, I should add you to the Bendit because I haven't made it public yet, but I should add you to the Bendit repo so you can look at it. It's still but
yeah, let me see it because it might help. It might help me think about what I'm doing with the code, and it might maybe I can see some things that,
yeah,
in terms of making Bendit work with it, would be good.
I can walk you through it. It's really not difficult. It would just be I can kind of explain some stuff. I also have documentation. Like I documented the browser side, like the client side API, so you can generate docs with it and just like open the page and you can read through the API. So hopefully that explains a couple of things on it. But I think you would look at it and be like, oh yeah, okay, I get this. But I think
Oh yeah.
yeah, but I get it. But I think the server is where we would do that because if that stuff lives on the Collab-Hub server, and then the Collab-Hub stuff could be a part of the Bendit server, then if I'm running a Bendit performance and I have somebody want to join in and they're running a Collab-Hub client on the web or on their Max patch, they just, okay, change a couple things maybe, or change their head or write their headers or their messages a bit differently, and then we're merged in the same way. If I'm writing everything completely in Bendit, I can just write something that says go to Collab-Hub.
Great.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm going to be thinking about that for that purpose. Yeah, I got to build some new Bendit boards with the new. I have one here. The new circuit boards came in. I got to.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm trying to do these drawings. My friend Juliana Bers. Cool. Yeah, let's do it. Bye, everyone. Bye. So what